Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Mr. Sanders Twin again, and we are back. So, happy Sunday, or rather, hope you all have a really happy Monday, because that's what day it'll be when you guys watch this. But anyway, you know what would make it even happier? If you got to read the next two chapters of Ambassador. So, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 7. Gabe stood in a small and narrow room, alone. The walls seemed to be made out of thick, smoky glass. He looked up. If this place had a ceiling, it was very far above him. Hello, he tried to say, but he couldn't speak. Be welcome, Ambassador, the room said again, its slow, deep voice. The voice had no accent that Gabe could place. He wasn't even sure what language it spoke. At first, he thought it was English, the official and semi formal English of gray haired news anchors on television. But it might have been Spanish, the stately Spanish his grandparents always used on the phone when they wanted to seem especially grandparental. The room in front of him shifted, becoming silvery and reflective. Please observe your own image until it is familiar to you, the room said. We are now coordinating the recoherence of your entangled self. The first thing Gabe saw in the mirror was a floating metal ball. Doesn't look much like me so far, he thought. Please be patient while you coalesce, the room said. Now the mirror image looked like a floating tadpole the size of a soccer ball. It shifted again, growing limbs and losing a tail, then growing bristly hair before losing that too. Throughout each shift, the reflection looked back at Gabe with wide, dark eyes. They were expressive eyes, full of the same wary, skeptical wonder that Gabe felt while watching. Still not me, he said, out loud this time. The beastly looking thing in the mirror moved its mouth while he spoke. Your remote is collating sense memories, the room explained. Some of these memories are very old. Please be patient. Please do not fidget. Sorry. Gabe had been flapping his arms to see what his reflection would do with its own momentary limbs. He stopped. Is this the embassy? Yes, said the room. It sounded distracted, as though concentrating on something else. Good, said Gabe. Just glad I'm in the right place. Hello. He checked out the size and shape of his reflection's teeth. Hello, said the room. I am Protocol. Your remote is very nearly calibrated to your own sense of self. That still doesn't quite look like me, said Gabe, scrutinizing his reflection. He wore a simple reddish robe that looked a little bit like a martial arts uniform. Close, but too tall. Variation and mutations of perception and meaning are unavoidable in translation, said Protocol, sounding annoyed. Please proceed to the chancery. The mirrored wall slid open. Gabe hadn't actually understood most of that, but it was easy enough to understand the invitation of an open door. He paused in the doorway and peered down the corridor on the other side. He felt air on his skin, a little colder than comfortable. He also felt like he actually had a body here, like his arms and legs were with him. His emotions were a mix of top of the roller coaster feeling. Gabe didn't actually like roller coasters, but he always rode them anyway to quietly prove that he could. First day of school feeling and edge of cold swimming pool feeling, only much bigger, as though the swimming pool in front of him were several miles or several million miles deep. All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and answer that first question. How does Gabe feel about entering the Chancery? You'll find clues to this question at the end of this paragraph. His emotions were a mix of top of the roller coaster feeling, first day of school feeling, and edge of cold swimming pool feeling, only much bigger as though the swimming pool in front of him were several million miles deep. So think about what emotion would go along with those experiences. Like, how do you feel at the top of a roller coaster if you're scared of roller coasters? How do you feel if you're about to, you know, dive into a deep, cold swimming pool? And if you need a sentence starter, you can use Gabe feels blank about entering the Chancery. Okay, let's continue. Proceed, Ambassador, said Protocol. Please be patient, said Gabe, still hesitating. What am I supposed to do out there exactly? The room made an exasperated noise. I take it that your envoy has not yet explained this to you, and I note that your world is without a registered ambassador academy. You have had no prior training. Splendid. You're making me feel less welcome, Gay pointed out. I am very sorry, said Protocol without contrition. Experience trumps explanations, however, so I recommend that you simply proceed. Go meet your peers, communicate as best you can, and try not to start an intergalactic incident. Have fun! Thanks, said Gabe. Very helpful. You are most welcome, said Protocol. Gabe couldn't tell whether or not it was being sarcastic, but he very much suspected that it was. Please proceed. Gabe took a breath, let it out, and walked down the corridor. It was long, narrow, and made of the same thick and smoky glass stuff as the room behind it. The corridor opened into a room big enough to have its own sky. Clouds swirled and hovered in that sky. They looked more like the nebulae that Gabe had dreamed his way through than clouds of water vapor in the air back home. Orange tinted light came from every upward direction, as though local sunlight were setting everywhere at once. The room itself looked like several landscapes squeezed into a gymnasium. Gabe saw things that looked like hills and trees, though shaped with simple geometrical precision as though made rather than grown, and the colors were all unfamiliar, from purplish hillside plants to silvery tree leaves. He saw caves set into the ground, a lake that looked more viscous than watery, and stranger features of the landscape that he wasn't even sure what to name. The Chancery looked alien to him. It also looked like a really big playground. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next question. How would you describe the setting of the Chancery? You'll find the answer in these couple paragraphs right here. The room itself looked like several landscapes squeezed into a gymnasium. And also, he saw caves set into the ground, a lake that looked even more viscous than watery, and stranger features of the landscape that he wasn't even sure what to name. The Chancery looked alien to him. It also looked like a really big playground. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use I would describe the Chancery as blank. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Kids were everywhere, climbing, running, swimming, building things together, or flying through layers of cloud. They all seemed human shaped and Gabe size, with hair and skin colors just a few shades different from what he was used to. This was disappointing. He had expected some green skin and tentacles. Three of his fellow ambassadors seemed to be making sandcastles out of the dark blue black sand of the lakeshore. Or maybe they were speaking to each other in some sort of sculpture based language. Gabe watched from a distance, curious, but he couldn't really tell what they were doing. He glanced away and accidentally caught sight of those same three ambassadors out of the corner of his eye. They weren't human shaped anymore. One looked like a crab with the head of a camel. Another looked like a lump of dandelion seeds. The third was huge. That's all Gabe could tell at a glance. A face and one limb rested on the sand. The rest disappeared into the water. Gabe stared at them directly. All three ambassadors looked human again. One crouching, one sitting, and one resting on his stomach with feet idly splashing the water behind him. Gabe squinted. All three took on very different shapes. They only look like me when I look at them directly, he realized. Okay, so we have another question to answer. What is strange about how the aliens appear to Gabe? Make sure you're paying attention to these couple paragraphs. Gabe stared at them directly. All three ambassadors looked human again. One crouching, one sitting, and then they only look like me when I look at them directly, he realized. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use the aliens look blank to Gabe. All right. Let's go ahead and move on. He squinted up at the flying ambassadors and caught glimpses of wings or waving tendrils. With eyes open, he just saw kids, flying kids. They shouted and swooped, playing an airborne ball game. The three on the beach might have been playing some sort of board game, but shaping the towers and tunnels of the board itself seemed at least as important as moving little stone pieces across it. He watched carefully, but he couldn't tell how to play, and he didn't feel comfortable intruding. He didn't feel comfortable at all. Instead, he felt confused, disoriented, out of place, alien. Gabe didn't like this feeling, so he went walking and exploring to try to shake it off. He couldn't shake it off, but the feeling shifted inside him. It traded awkwardness for awe. We're not alone, he thought. He had always figured that aliens must exist somewhere. Space was entirely too big, filled with too many other stars and way too many other planets for the rest of it to stand empty. And he had known about the living reality of intelligent yet non human life since his first chat with the envoy. But the envoy was just one purple oddity that fit in an aquarium. Now aliens surrounded Gabe. He squinted to glimpse the wide variety of shapes and movement. He was one of many. His own world was just one place among infinite many. Gabe felt very small. He savored that feeling and kind of enjoyed it while he explored. Then he came to the forest. It looked like a coral reef in a massive jungle gym as much as it resembled terrestrial trees. Forest games apparently involved lots of running, hiding, and chasing. Gabe climbed a tree to get out of the way. The surface of the branches felt smoother than tree bark, but not slippery. He perched on a limb and watched the kids below. He could recognize bits of hide and seek, tag, and capture the flag, but he wasn't sure how they fit together. There seemed to be teams, but players often switched sides. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next question. How does Gabe feel in the Chancery? You'll find clues to this in this paragraph right here. He watched carefully, but he couldn't tell how to play, and he didn't feel comfortable intruding. He didn't feel comfortable at all. Instead, he felt confused, disoriented, out of place, alien. Gabe didn't like this feeling, so he went on walking and exploring to try to shake it off. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use Gabe feels blank in the Chancery. All right, let's move on. Two other ambassadors climbed an adjacent tree. They both looked like girls, and both wore clothes similar to Gabe's. He resisted the sudden urge to squint at them, to find out what other shapes they might have. He felt like that would have been rude. One stood upright on a thick branch. She had high cheekbones, a wide nose, and very straight dark hair. She looked severe. Gabe thought that she should have pointy ears, but she didn't. Kayan, she said, and pointed to herself. Gabe, said Gabe. Then he hesitated, unsure what information they were supposed to swap. Is Kayan your name or your species or where you're from? My name is Gabe. I'm from Earth, or Terra. We call the planet Terra in Latin. That sounds more official somehow. Hi, I'm babbling. Sorry. Kayan, she said again. I am the ambassador of the Kayan, which isn't my species, and it isn't my world. We don't have worlds. We are different species, all traveling in a great nomadic fleet, and all together call ourselves the Kayan. Call me that. It isn't my name. I won't share my name with you. Fair enough, said Gabe. Gabe is my name, but you're still welcome to use it. I will, she said, and stared at him. Gabe wondered if she was squinting, if she saw him now as he saw himself. He felt exposed and uncomfortable. The other girl held on with both hands and both feet, crouching on her branch and mostly paying attention to the games below. She shrieked with laughter every time someone got tagged, and her laugh was much larger than herself. I'm Sapie, she said, without looking up. My peer name is Sapie, anyway. Is hydrogen the most common element where you're from? I'm Gabe, said Gabe, and yeah, I think so. Good, she said, delighted. Everyone says so. If they know what I'm talking about. Hydrogen's everywhere. Sapie pulled a handful of leaves off the branch, wadded each one into a tight little ball, and threw them at the players on the ground. She laughed when they missed, and she laughed when they hit. Some players shouted protests, but most of them just dodged. Kayan was still glaring at him. Gabe stood on his own branch and looked out over the chancery, trying to get a sense of the place and its size. Who made all this? He asked. Sapie looked up, surprised. You don't have an academy, do you? Gabe felt a flush of embarrassment, along with a hefty helping of annoyance at the envoy and protocol for tossing him into a great big room full of aliens without so much as a hint about what this would be like. He tried to shrug off the annoyance and shame. Nope, he said. No academy. Just learning as I go. We all made it, said Kayan, one piece at a time. We're still making it. Everybody's home environment helps to shape this one, so there should be one corner that feels like home to you. The rest is translated to look at least a little bit familiar. She stood on her branch with her arms crossed, not moving. It looked kind of badass to stand in a tree without using her hands to hold on. Gabe wondered if she actually had hands, but he didn't squint at her to find out. Sapie, by contrast, kept in constant motion. She jumped between branches, threw more wadded up leaves, and tried to disrupt the games below. I didn't expect all this to be a big playground, Gabe said. Of course it is, said Sapie. Everything plays, and starting up a game is usually easier than talking. But we're ambassadors, Gabe protested. Shouldn't we be doing, I don't know, important diplomatic things? You don't know very much about games, do you? Kayan asked. Gabe didn't know what to say to that. Be nice, said Sapie. He's new and confused. She climbed from her branch to his and then leaned in close as though she had something extremely important and secret to say. Gabe leaned in to listen. Sapie laughed when he did. Have you noticed how different ambassadors have different comfort zones? That wasn't the sort of important secret Gabe had expected. No, he said. I haven't been here long enough to notice. It's hilarious, she told him in a whisper laugh. Some prefer to stand farther back and shout at each other, and others don't really consider it a conversation if their faces aren't touching. So when two ambassadors try to talk but don't agree on proper conversational distance, one of them is always moving in while the other is always moving back. They don't even notice it most of the time. It's like dancing. You'll see it happen if you stay up here in the trees long enough. Just look down and watch people talk. She reached over and tapped the tip of his nose. I'm glad you're not the sort who needs to be shouted at from a distance. Kayan over there doesn't mind close conversations either, but only once she gets used to you. And that takes a while. Kayan said nothing and did not move. Gabe had noticed the same sort of thing living in Minneapolis. Lots of people there were Scandinavian, or at least descended from Scandinavians, tall, blonde, and more accustomed to large conversational distances, whereas Gabe's family preferred nose to nose chats. So he felt perfectly fine an inch away from Sapie's face. A part of Gabe was jumping up and down, shouting, Girl, girl, almost rubbing faces, someone girlish. but he didn't have too much trouble ignoring that part. Sapie seemed like a girl to him, but he had no idea what she was like to herself. The inner voice shouting girl sounded far enough away. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next question. How would you describe Gabe's first impression of Sapie and Kayan? You can look at this paragraph right here. Um, she stood on a branch with her arms crossed, not moving. It looked kind of cool. Like, I'm not going to say that word again. To stand in a tree without using her hands to hold on. So he's impressed right here. And then also make sure you're focusing on this part. A part of Gabe was jumping up and down and shouting, girl, girl, almost rubbing faces with someone girlish. So that's also a clue. Sorry, you can use a sentence starter. His first impression is blank. All right, let's continue. My turn for questions, he said. I've got strange ships in my solar system. Not sure who they are. Not sure what they're doing either. How do I find out? Kayan said nothing. Sapie made a thoughtful humming noise. Who are your closest neighbors? Ask Protocol how to find them if you don't already know. Travel takes a while, so it's probably someone already nearby. She jumped away and threw more leaves at the kids below. Gabe plucked a leaf from his own branch. It felt more malleable than terrestrial tree leaves, more like a kind of sticky paper. He folded it into a leaf paper airplane and then tossed it out and away from the forest. Several other ambassadors broke away from their chasing game to watch it fly. They pulled down more foldable leaves to try making their own. Gabe's flew farther than he thought it would. The plane sailed over hills and then whacked an ambassador in the back of the head. The ambassador turned around. This one was tall and very pale, his skin whitish blue. He stood apart from every game, but he didn't look like a newcomer. He looked like a predator. Everyone else seemed to avoid his company and move wide around him. The pale ambassador noticed Gabe in the tree, and they shared one moment of eye contact. Gabe waved. Oops, he said. Sorry. Another ball of leaves smacked the side of Gabe's face. Look away, look away, look away, Sapie whispered. Stupid. Don't talk to him. Don't even look at Omegan of the Outlast. Not ever. Do you even have eyes? Most do, but not everybody. Light is a pretty efficient way to notice things, so practically everyone grows eyes. But sometimes they don't. If your species grew up in very deep caves or down at the bottom of very deep oceans or in the middle of very dense clouds, then maybe you didn't have enough light to bother with eyes. So you might not know what I'm talking about when I say, don't look at him, but try not to look at him anyway. I've got eyes, said Gabe. He shot a quick look back at the pale and solitary ambassador, but that one no longer seemed to notice or care about Gabe's existence. Sapie climbed up beside him, then stopped challenging Outlast by catching his attention. If his people come to your system, then you should run, flee. Off you go, all of you, your whole species, and whoever else you can bring along. You need to keep moving if you want to outlast them. Gabe glared at her and wiped sticky leaf sap from his cheek. Moving? Yes, moving, she said with exaggerated slowness as though speaking to an idiot. Leaving the nest, heading up and out to other worlds. We can't do that yet, Gabe admitted. We did walk on the moon, though. I haven't been there, personally, but my people have. Your own moon? Sapie asked. Yes, said Gabe. Well, she said, and leaped back to her own branch. Well, well, well. That's tremendously impressive. Your own moon. Right there, big in your own sky. What a great place to run and hide. They'll never find you there. Forget about running then. Just keep your head down. If you have one. Maybe you'll get to keep it. Gabe plucked a leaf, wadded it up, and threw it at Sapie. It bounced off her forehead. She looked shocked for a moment and then laughed and laughed. You're worth talking to, she said, still laughing. You might even be worth playing games with. Kayan, what do you think? Oh, she's gone already. Gabe looked. Ambassador Kayan no longer stood on her branch, though Gabe hadn't noticed her leave. You seem to be leaving too, Sapie said. Bye. What do you mean? Gabe asked her. Then he felt a sudden, wrenching dizziness and woke up. All right, let's answer the next question. What does Sapie warn Gabe about? You'll find the answer to this in this paragraph right here. Look away, look away, look away, Sapie whispered. Stupid, don't talk to him. Don't even look at Omegan of the Outlast, not ever. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use Sapie warns Gabe about blank. All right, let's move on to the next chapter. Chapter 8. Gabe woke from his accidental nap at noon. The phone was ringing. He stumbled downstairs. Hello, he said to the phone once he had found it. He wasn't fully awake yet. His only goal was to get the phone to stop ringing, and saying hello was how he got it to stop. Hello, my heart, said his mother. For one strange moment, Gabe thought it was the envoy on the phone, but the two of them didn't really sound the same, even though both used the same voice with the same accent. The rhythm was different. The envoy's words were clipped, separate, and specific. Everything Mom said moved like water, flowing downstream from wherever it started to wherever it needed to be. Hi, Mom, said Gabe. I need you to do something for me, she said with a hitch and a stumble in her voice, or maybe that was just cracking on the phone connection. I need you to get a few diapers and wipes together, and pajamas for the twins. Toss all that in a bag. Okay, said Gabe. In his grogginess, this sounded only slightly odd. What's going on? Frankie's mother is coming by to pick you up and bring you here, she told him, her voice careful and brittle. Gabe became fully and completely awake at this news. He hadn't seen or spoken to Frankie's mom since the destruction in her backyard and everything in it, and he had been hoping to avoid her for as long as possible. What's going on? He asked again. Where are you? She told him. The doorbell rang. Frankie's mom was tall and always prickly cold. The two of them did not say much on the drive to the ICE detention center. This wasn't surprising. Frankie's mom never said much. ICE stood for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, apparently. They drove to this icy place in a pocket of icy silence. Gabe stared out the window. He wasn't sure he could speak if he tried. His brain and the rest of him seemed disentangled from each other. The waiting room inside the detention center was a small place with a gray carpet, 10 dingy looking chairs, and a guard behind a counter. The guard was a woman who looked and sounded like old leather, the way serious cigarette smokers usually looked and sounded. She was polite enough. She didn't ask for Gabe's birth certificate, though he had brought it with him, just in case he needed to prove where he was from. Once the guard called his name, Gabe went through a large metal door that looked like it wasn't supposed to open, not ever. The door shut behind him with a sound that suggested it never would open again. You are not welcome here, the door said in its heaviness, but now you can't leave. Gabe met his father in a small room. They sat down, facing each other, a thick glass barrier between them. Dad wore an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs on a long chain that connected to cuffs at his feet. He took very small steps to get to his chair. All right, let's answer the next question. Where is Gabe's father? Pretty simple question with a simple answer. You'll find that in this paragraph. The two of them didn't say much on the drive to the ICE detention center. A sentence starter could be Gabe's father is at blank. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the last question and finish the chapter. I brought the diapers, Gabe said first, and quickly, without saying hello. For some reason, it seemed important to say that first and to say it in English. I gave them to the guard in the waiting room. His mouth and his brain still didn't feel connected. He tried to ask what happened, but he wasn't sure how. Mom hadn't explained it at all. Gabe wanted to know where she and Andres and Noemi were, and why they weren't all right there, and he didn't know how to ask any of that either. He wanted to know if the twins were wearing tiny orange jumpsuits. I didn't stop at a stop sign, Dad said. He said it as though that were an adequate explanation. Gabe just blinked, because it wasn't really. Not completely. I was sure that I did, but the officer said I didn't come to a complete stop. Okay, said Gabe. That's something you can get arrested for? No, said Dad. But if you come to their attention, then they can check your documents. And we don't have any. Your mother used to. She had a visa at first, but I don't. Never did. He was trying to explain and trying to apologize and trying to understand himself how this had happened. Gabe knew that much at least. We never meant to stay, Dad went on. We figured we were nomads, your mother and I always thought that by now we'd be in some other part of the world. But I had a friend who wanted to open up a restaurant here, so we came to help him out and brought Lupe. And then we had you. Two kids kept us in one place for longer than we planned. Then we made the place home. I never thought we'd make a home somewhere with no defenses against howling Arctic winds, but we did. We stayed here. He paused. Gabe nodded once to keep his father talking. All right, let's answer the next question. Why did Gabe's father get arrested? You'll find what you're looking for right here. I didn't stop at a stop sign, Dad said. He said it as though that were an adequate explanation. Okay, said Gabe. That's something you can get arrested for? No, said Dad. But if you come to their attention, then they check your documents. And we don't have any. Your mother used to. She had a visa at first, but I don't. Never did. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use Gabe's father got arrested because blank. All right, let's finish up the chapter. They'll let your mother go soon, Dad went on. Her and the twins. Tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. I don't know. But they'll release her on recognizance. He said the awkward official word slowly. The syllables obviously tasted bitter to him. They still want to deport her, but that'll take months to happen. More than a year, maybe. And she doesn't have to pay a bond now, luckily. They'll let the three of them go. He said this in a reassuring way, or at least he tried to. But Gabe noticed immediately that his father hadn't said anything at all about himself. What about you? Gabe asked. When do they let you out? His father smiled with only half of his mouth, the way he did whenever the car broke, or when anything else broke, or when snowplows scraped the streets clean of a blizzard, but blocked the driveway with a 2-foot wall of solid ice and slush that the landlord was supposed to shovel but never actually did. It was Dad's "this sucks" expression. Me, they'll just throw out of the country, immediately, tomorrow morning. He paused to let that sink in. It didn't really sink in. Gabe just stared at him. He went on. I don't get months of hearing and paperwork like your mother does, because I've hopped the border before. I was a kid, first learning how to ride a motorcycle around the world. I got caught right away and sent home. So this is my second time getting deported, and there's no way to contest a second time. Not for 10 years. In a decade, I'll be allowed to ask permission for re entry, but not until then. Not even with 4 children on this side of the fence. And we can't all go south. They won't let us all go south. All this is going to take a long while to untangle, and we're going to rack up some mighty big phone bills between now and then. Maybe you can mow a few lawns this summer, earn extra cash to buy some long distance phone time. Dad tried to maintain his half smile, but he looked stricken. Whatever he felt right then, he was clearly trying hard not to feel it. His voice was half kidding, half serious, and entirely ashamed to tell Gabe that he would have to pitch in to pay for international phone bills. Gabe needed to make that expression leave his father's face immediately, so he did the only thing he could think of. He leaned forward and spoke with the sort of earnest mock formality that Dad had used when he gave him a hammer of wisdom and truth. Every restaurant in the city will rise up in protest and demand your return, Gabe said in solemn promise. Dad laughed, surprised. Tell them not to give up hope, he answered. Tell them that my spoon and saucepan will return to the kitchens of the city. Tell them to tighten their belts and be brave. I'll tell them, Gabe promised. Somehow they'll endure other cooking while you're gone. Neither of them joked about what Mom's cooking was actually like. The leathery guard told them that time was up. Dad's face got tense again. Tell Lupe something. Tell her I wish I could see her before I have to go, but I can't. She could still come visit you today, said Gabe, confused. Dad gave him a warning look and dropped his voice. Better not. Gabe understood the warning, if not the reasons for it. He nodded. His father seemed to relax. Gabe did not relax. His face hurt. All the muscles clenched with a tension like they did whenever he and Frankie watched a horror movie. I'm the ambassador of this entire world, Gabe thought. All of it. But nobody here knows that. I can talk to aliens thousands of light years away, but we'll need to scramble for cash so I can keep talking to Dad by phone. He said goodbye to his father through the glass barrier. On the way home, Gabe began to unfreeze and unclench. He tried not to. He wasn't sure what would happen if he let himself feel the way he actually felt. All right, everybody, that is it for chapters 7 and 8. I hope you enjoyed them, and I will see you in the next read aloud. Until then, take care.